Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for bearing with me. Go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can you guys see everything okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Oh, it went on without me. There we go. Welcome to Ensuring Device Readiness for K-12 state testing. Our session is being recorded and we will truncate the beginning of this. So if you need to watch the recording back later, you can. I'm your host, Kat Zinn, a senior CSM here at Absolute Security, and joining me is Christopher Scott from the formerly 6 Sense side of the house. Our agenda today covers enforcing device compliance. So that's, of course, setting up those minimum standards for testing, verifying device readiness, where you can report on hardware, software, network, and security compliance. And then the great stuff, automating remediation, because Absolute is the only solution embedded in the firmware that gives us that unbreakable digital tether to your device, which gives us unmatched visibility into hardware, software, usage, geolocation, data discovery, and more to better manage devices and identify and respond to anomalies. And because we don't want to PowerPoint you to death, we'll quickly move to the console and walk you through all the steps. And finally, we'll have a Q&A. We're pretty informal, so you can just come off mute, or you can write your questions in the chat, whichever you're most comfortable with. Preparing for state-mandated testing can feel like prepping for a moon landing. Every system needs to work perfectly, or Houston, aka Help Desk, gets a lot of calls. I'm sure you guys know the typical system issues include system-wide server crashes, insufficient bandwidth, missing or misconfigured testing software, and compliance and audit pressure. So some of the ways Absolute can help, we assist with enforcing device compliance by letting you specify required applications, reinforcing anti-malware, encryption, geolocation, OS patch level, and we can help verify device readiness by helping you create a device group for state testing, make custom reports to track compliance across your fleet, and of course, those APIs, SIM integrations extend visibility into broader security workflows. And then, of course, everyone's favorite bit, let's automate those remediations and free up your people for more important stuff. As we talked about before, Absolute Persistent self-heals, so that allows us that unbreakable tether to also heal your security and management tools. So you can also create rules that trigger actions when a device is non-compliant, such as sending an end-user message or freezing a device, running scripts to fix settings, restart services, or reinstall apps. And finally, Absolute patching and remediation of your applications and OS can be fully automated with workflows that can be adapted for all your customizations and enterprise requirements. All right, let's hop into the console and get working through here. All right, back up. So we'll start with policies. So policy groups are where you're going to set up different data points that you want collected in Absolute. You can create different policy groups based on things like student versus staff, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, depending on the size of your district, and things like OS. So you can see here which features are supported in Chrome, Mac, and Windows, coming soon, Linux. And then, of course, the global policy group here is going to be that default bucket that devices fall into when they're first imaged with your Absolute agent. So if all the devices in your environment are treated the same, you can just keep one global policy group and stick with that. Likely not, so you will want to create a policy group and enable all the features you want. And then once you have that, those features enabled, then you're going to add devices to that group either manually or by setting up a rule. So you can manually add things by going to your devices, selecting those devices, and then saying you want to change the policy group, or you can do a bulk upload here if you already have a list of devices that you want in there. Just kind of a quick run through on that part. Hopefully you already know how to do that. So you can see hardware tracking is on by default. And just to go over the important bits that we're going to be talking about today that you'll need to enable if you haven't already, we've got geolocation tracking, and that's for all three OSs here. Installed applications, that's for Windows and Mac. And you can choose whether or not you want to include the usage data. That's going to track the time that an app is in focus, as well as the average CPU and memory usage of that application. And we'll go through required applications here in a bit. Web usage tracks the websites that are in focus in a Chrome browser, so either on Windows or Chromebooks. And we'll also go through device compliance here in a bit. But first, we're going to come over here to application policies. And this is where we can set up those critical applications that we want to repair and reinstall. And just caveat, depending on your license type, you may not have access to every feature. So when you create a policy here, you'll see two different things, again, depending on your license type. So the resilience allows you to report, repair, or reinstall critical applications like Intune, BitLocker, Defender, CrowdStrike, things like that. So there is a list to choose from. We're just going to look at CrowdStrike as an example here. So you will need to set up for each policy group. Sorry, wrong one. So you can see the ones that it's already on in our test environment here. We've already got it on the global policy group, so we'll just pick one of these. And then, of course, you're going to select the version range that you want running on your devices. Now, our DevOps team does update these from time to time. CrowdStrike, the latest is 7.29. So you'll just select the highest version, as long as it's not above the one that's in your environment. And then you can target the actual version down here. So if you're on that latest version, you would do 7.29.* to catch that wildcard for anything. You can check report higher versions as compliant if you want to, but note this will not run the health checks on those devices that are on the higher version. So if you can help it, just stick to the version that you're on. Again, depending on your license, you'll have report only perhaps and have to take manual action, or you can choose report, repair, and reinstall. Depending on which application you're in, it'll have different options. For example, Intune doesn't really have anything to reinstall, so it just has report and repair. So depending on what you have there, you'll have different versions targeted. So if you do enable reinstall for these apps, on most of them, there is a choice to not reinstall or upgrade the app if it's already installed. If you do want to upload an installer, you can do that in absolute. You have a small amount of space where we'll host that for you, or you can host your own installer file and just tell us the URI of Dropbox, that sort of thing, where you're hosting the file. And then you just certify that I have sufficient licenses to install CrowdStrike or whatever app you're on and agree to these conditions. And then you would save. If you want to look at it later, save and activate if you're ready to do so now. So if you're only doing report, no reason not to save and activate. So for each application, just to not take too long on this, you can click Help and Support down here in the corner, and it will take you straight to the policy for that particular app. You can see some of the different applications that we have available here. You'll see the system requirements. You can look at exactly what it's checking for health, exactly what it's going to be reinstalling if that's the case. And then it'll have some details on preparing the installer. It'll let you know if it's an exe or an MSI file. things about pre-caching the installers on your device. So if you can't reach it, it will still reinstall that if it's off your network. And then things about configuring the application resilience policies. So our help is great in that way. We've got one on each page, either here or you can do it here and help for this page if it doesn't have the specific one like it did when I was looking through there. And then the other application here is required applications. So maybe there's something that we don't have a repair and reinstall for, but it may be critical to your environment. So I know that ClassLink is one that a lot of districts use, or we're talking about state testing, maybe you use Pearson or ExamSoft, or maybe you have a particular browser. So you're going to come here, it's going to look through all the installed applications on your devices. So you'll just start typing and you should see the app you want. So if it was ClassLink, you'd start typing class and it should pop up. We don't have that on our test devices, so I'm just going to use Adobe as an example and choose Adobe Acrobat. So if this were, ClassLink, Pearson, ExamSoft, whatever, you're going to see the exact parameters for your environment and what's installed in your neighborhood. So you can say, okay, I want to configure this on Windows and Mac because I have both of those in my environment. And for Windows, I can choose the required version. I can just say, I don't care. As long as Acrobat's on there, I'm good. Or you can say it's at least version, 24.005. And you can take out the end of this if you want to. When you click away, it will update that with the zeros. And then the next check would be the authenticity of the signatures. And again, this will vary on your environment. You can say, I want you to check if no signatures are found. We don't care, we'll move on. Or you can say, I need at least one valid argument, one signature that's correct to be considered compliant. So that's up to you, or you can just skip the authenticity check altogether, depending on what you want. Same with Mac, you can choose a different version for that. And then you can choose multiple policy groups on this one. So it's a little easier. They don't do that on the resilience applications because you may have different policies needed for different groups, different departments, that kind of thing. So you have to configure those one at a time. So if you are following the bouncing ball with me in your console, you can click save on this and look at it later for what you need to do. Or if you're just ready and you've got it the way you want it, you can do save and activate. Now that that's configured, we're going to go back to our policy groups. And we're going to configure device compliance here. Again, you may or may not have access to this feature depending on your license type. But on this one, it allows you to determine what is considered compliant in your environment. You can choose all of these, you can choose one of these, or anywhere in between. So the first thing is anti-malware. This is going to look at, just as it says, your anti-malware and say it has to be up to date on its anti-malware protections. Next would be encryption. Most school districts I've talked to have said that they use used space encrypted. They don't encrypt the unused space. So in that case, you would want to check this box to say, we still consider that to be compliant. Geolocation, you can either say the device must not be in one of these locations. ITAR prohibited countries is the quickest way to do the ones that our government already prohibits sensitive information to going to. So that's the easiest way, is just to search ITAR and look for the ITAR prohibited countries if you don't want devices in those locations. Or you can choose devices must be in one of these locations. So you could say United States, and you could add Canada if you're on the north border, or if you're on the south border, maybe your students take their devices to Mexico. And as long as it's in one of these, it's just fine. So you can set that up as well. Or you can toggle it off and just say, I don't care about that particular parameter. Or maybe you're a district that hasn't gone to encryption on all devices yet, or staff devices have it, but not student devices. You could turn that off depending on your policy group that you're setting this up for. Next, you can check the OS version. So again, you can choose Windows and or Mac, depending on your environment. And you can say, I want the minimum version to be 24H2 or any of the installed versions that come up. You can set a maximum version that you consider to be compliant. Or again, you can just toggle it off completely and just use the parameters you want. And then those required applications and the resilient applications that we configured before, you can also make those part of your device compliance. So you can say they're required to have a Chrome browser. Doesn't matter, any version. Microsoft OneDrive. Great. And you'll have configured that like we did for the ClassLink or the Pearson. So you can say, yeah, that has to be on there for testing devices. Definitely has to have Pearson. So you can do that. And then BitLocker, maybe you want to know if they're encrypted before they start doing testing, that sort of thing. And the final parameter here is unknown status. So when you first turn on features in the console, it does take sometimes, a little bit for those devices to check in. Maybe they're offline, or maybe they just checked in and it's, going to be another 15 minutes. So you can choose to say with unknown status, we don't want to report on all those. We're going to consider that compliant, or maybe you do. So up to you. You can check that box or not, but those are the parameters that you would want to configure here, and then save. So now, of course, to verify your device readiness, we're going to want to look at reporting on all this. So first, you'll come to your devices. And again, best practice, if you're just wanting to look at devices that you're using for state testing, you'll want to create a device group. So if you, again, have a static list of devices that you're using for state testing, you can come here and upload a device list. You can use serial numbers, absolute identifiers. If it's Chromebooks, you can use the annotated asset IDs, or device names if they're Windows. And you would just put your file in here and then follow the steps to create a group, a device group. Or you can do a smart device group. So if you say create a new smart group, and then you could do state testing devices. You're always going to leave it on agent status is active, and you want to be sure and click the and, not the or, because then it would look for either or, and we only want to look at active devices, and that means devices that have the absolute agent and a license. And then you will look at things that we collect from hardware. So we can create a smart group based on like make and model. So maybe model, and you'll say contains latitude, whatever the devices that you use for state testing. If there's a particular make and model, you can do that. Or you can say, contains 3300 or whatever model you're using. And then you would save, and it would create a dynamic group of those devices. You can see down here, 16 devices match these filters. So you could go, oh, wait, like we should have 150 of these. So you may need to relook at your parameters. But yeah, you would create that device group so that you could just look at that on these reports. We'll come to the devices or to that group, and you would edit the fields that you want to see. So this is the hardware bit. So everybody should have access to reporting like this for most of this, if nothing else. The only thing that you wouldn't see is that device compliance. So if you don't have access to that feature, you would not see the fields. You would see that in your tags, but we're going to go ahead and add them here. And as you can see, you can drag things from the left over to the right. You can also click add, but then you have to kind of come over here and drag them up and down over here. So I think it's easier just to drag the whole thing. If it has more than one thing, you can just grab it by the top. So we'll see the device compliance there. So some of the other things, if you don't have that feature that you might want to check, are things like battery life. So you can look at the estimated charge remaining. So maybe you have a required peripheral. So you could look at the sound device. So you'll see here, we've got sound device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You might just want to add all those fields at first because usually computers will just kind of hold that space. So if something was plugged in once, they never use it again, and then it's plugged in again, you might see that there. But when you use the filters, it'll take it down to just one. So you'll know which ones have the fields that you need in that. So maybe you need a keyboard or pointing device for your mouse. You can look at all those things and add them to the columns. Usually you'd put, the manufacturer or the name, depending on what it is in your environment that is required for state testing. You can also do the OS version. So if you come down here, you can see the OS version. I'm going to put that right under battery. And then already included the report is the OS name. So I'm going to put that here with the version just so you can see those together. Now, OS version is going to be good for Windows, Mac, and Chromebooks. You can also do an OS build, if I can type. So the OS build is going to be for Mac and Windows. If you're concerned about a particular patch level, you can look at the update build revision as well. But for now, we're just going to do OS version on here just so you can see what it looks like. Maybe your state testing devices are required to be on a particular domain. You can look at that as well. And you want to see also if your anti-malware is updated, what the definition is, and if it's up to date. If you have the device compliance fields, sorry, it's a little hard to do all these, you will not need this. But as I said, not everyone has that feature, so this is a way you can kind of do it manually and look at that on your own. And finally, location. So maybe you want to be sure that your location is in a certain city, state, country. So you can look at those as well. This is going to be a lot to look at on the page, but we're just going to do it so that you can see the different fields here. So you can see we've got devices all over here in our environment, but you can see the battery, estimated charge remaining, the domain. So you can see NM test workgroup is, of course, the default for most, but you would want to put that in your environment. You can see the OS name and version here. You can see if it's compliant or not. If you do the compliance details, it will tell you exactly what it is. So this one is non-compliant because it is not encrypted, the OS version is wrong, and the application policies for BitLocker, NetMotion, and the Chrome browser are not compliant. You can see the anti-malware version is 4.18 and that it's Windows Defender. For most of these, you can see some different ones here. The last time that the anti-malware was updated, the last time the definition was updated, the average daily usage, whether it's encrypted or not, the local IP address, you can tweak all of these. So you can either export this by going here. I do recommend saving it as a report, like state device testing status, something like that, so that you can easily come look at it in the reports later over here. Or you can export it on the fly, make your pivot tables and look at the that way. If there's just a particular thing that you're worried about, you can add the filters here. So you can say domain contains myisd.org, or you can just look at the ones that do not contain myisd.org so that you'll know which ones are not in your environment before you do that state testing. So this is just an example of some of the ways that you can use these and make your own custom reports. Like I say, we report on like 400 or 500 pieces of information, so you can get really granular on these depending on what you're doing. You can say, I want to see if the estimated charge remaining for the battery is less than an hour. Different things like that. And then under applications here, We have the summary, which just shows you all your installed applications. And then the compliance. If you have that feature for the required applications, you can see that here. This one has different fields. It doesn't have as many as the main device page, but it will have information about the parameters you've required applications. So you can just come to the filters here and say the status is non-compliant or missing and apply. You can also add a second filter if the application contains, say, Zscaler, CrowdStrike, whatever, crowd. You'll hit enter and apply, and then if you can just look at that. And again, you can save this as a report if you just want to look at, non-compliant Defender, non-compliant CrowdStrike, that kind of thing, so that you can get, once more, really granular on those reports. And it's really helpful if you're being audited by any entities to prove compliance, that you're getting those things ready to roll. And then finally, we have the dashboards here. So there's some pre-made ones. You can see the one I made for student shenanigans, where you would just add your own dashboard if there's particular things you want to look at. But again, to keep this brief, we're just going to look quickly at the compliance one. So here you can see things like encryption status by country. You can see the anti-malware, or if there's sensitive data on devices by device group, that sort of thing. So we're just going to look at anti-malware right now. These are totally customizable. So say it's Windows Defender in your environment, and that's the majority. You can say, well, I only want to look at the ones where it is not or does not contain Defender. And apply. And then, of course, you'd want to change the name for this to say, not Defender, something like that. And you can either save a copy so that you leave the old one alone, or you can save it as is. You can say the anti-malware name is what it's going by here, and you can do up to 20. So you can save that here. And it will show you how many of your devices, have nothing, or other solutions that you may need to update. You can, once more, export this data, or you can save it as a report. So it's really nice to have those visual, quickies available for your leadership team, but you may want the more comprehensive report to export. And then, of course, API and SIM integration is available as well. Once more, I'm not going to take too long on this since we had a little bit of a late start, but you can always do the help for this page, and it will let you know how to set up our SIM connector if you have a SIM. And you can only include the events that you want to include. So because we do have that self-healing agent, that's something you may want to see, because that might indicate that somebody's tried to remove us from the device. You might want to see if your anti-malware became uncompliant, or your encryption became uncompliant. Those are some of the events that you can connect with your SIM. And if you don't have a SIM, we do have API available. It's pretty agnostic, so you can use it with just about anything. It's something that most people tie into like their inventory or their ticketing system. So again, too in depth here. So if you need assistance or want information beyond, the help page, you can sign up for an office hours topic. I do have had that prior to our webinar today. Have those on every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So you can always sign up for those if you have a specific topic you want to deep dive in just in your environment. Or you can reach out to your sales team, and we do have engineers that can hop on a call with them for more technical assistance. All right, and finally, that juicy bit, you want to automate those remediations and free up your people for more important stuff. So we already went over configuring that repair and reinstall for those critical applications, but another tool you can use is here under policies. You can create rules. So this is for triggering actions which you can do either from the device state. So if you have that, the device compliance status is non-compliant, then you can do things. You can email console users. So you can email yourself, or if you click here, they don't even have to be in the console. If you just want to send them a notification, this is happening, you can say DEL, it@myisd.org, and then you would just hit enter and it would add that. The drop downs here are people that are in the console, so you can just click on those if you want to. And you can do multiple actions. So yes, I want to be notified if the device compliance status is not compliant. I also want to send a message to the end user and say, device not compliant. So we're going to name this just so we can save it later. You're going to want to add your logo in here so that people don't think it's some malicious thing. Makes it look a little more legit if it's got your logo in there. And then you can say something like, device is not compliant. Type, bring it to your librarian, ed tech person, whatever, ASAP. And you can make this message be, whatever you want. Submit doesn't really make sense in this case, so you would change the submit button to something like acknowledge. You can add this message to the library for later. It says entitled message, so you would want to say, device not compliant, or something like that to save it for later. You also have the option, so if you don't select this box, it's just going to pop up in the corner of the device's window. If you wanted to take up the whole screen and they can't take any action on the computer until they click acknowledge, then you can click the box to display this as a full screen message, or you can allow participants to snooze. I would say not more than once, because that can just set off a whole cycle. So then you can preview your message here. It may look a little different on your device. I do recommend testing it on different makes and models just to see that it looks the way you want it to. But you'll see here they can snooze for 30 minutes, 1 hour, or 3 hours, or they can just hit acknowledge. Once thing looks the way you want it, you can hit add here, or if you wanted to tweak something and say, yeah, no, I don't want them to be able to snooze that, then you can add it here or preview again once you make your changes. So you can also do things like run a script to fix settings, restart services, or reinstall apps. So when you run the script, you'll see the list of scripts here. You can also create a custom script if you want to. These are some of the ones that our IT team has been testing. But you can do things like, so if you type restart, you'll see start, stop, or restart a Windows service. So if you need to do things like that, you can, or a simple exe installer, simple MSI installer. You can choose those and you'll see the required options once you choose one of those with the download path and all of those things available there. Again, don't want to go too deep into this, but you can always hit the question mark if you need help configuring those things. All right, and finally, I'm going to hand it over to Christopher to show you guys how to automate workflows for absolute patching and vulnerability remediation. Easy for me to say. All right, Christopher, take it away.
All right, thank you, Kat, and thank you again for bringing me into this. So, as Kat mentioned, I do come to Absolute from our 6th Sense side as part of the acquisition back in 24, and I bring the piece of from the patch and vulnerability mitigation and remediation pieces. So that's exactly what I want to go over with you today. So one of the major parts, especially from an IT perspective of ensuring device readiness, is making sure that your device is compliant when it comes to patching and when it comes to security vulnerabilities. Many times we speak of those as the same thing. Both are different. So today our heavy focus is going to be looking at patch and patch remediation, and automation. Um, and then we'll spend some time looking into vulnerabilities as well, because they are two very different things. So what I have here is this is our RFA dashboard that you should be seeing on my screen here. And this is just a couple of devices that you'll see in here. These are some of my labs that I have loaded into my RFA instance, which is our resilience for automation, which does have our patch and vulnerability mitigation. So in here, we have the different sections. So we have patches and security. So both the different terminologies we separate on purpose. Many times they're talked about in the same breath, but we want to make sure we keep them separate in our logic. We devise several default queries by default. We provide them just so we can break it down into some that you can see critical patches, third-party updates, Flash, Java, whatever defines here. Personal preference is I like to create my own queries, and I like to work with my customers on creating their own queries to your best needs, right? Um, some of them are going to be when you're first starting off doing patching as a real holistic view, you're really hammering home patching of a device, then you're going to need to use your own queries for time consumption, right? You don't want to overburden a device, and you want to maximize the time availability and minimize the strain on the end user as well. So that's where these queries come into play and help you with that automation piece. So you can build out queries that say, as an example, I want a baseline one. What is baseline one? In this instance, for what I've created for you to view today, baseline one is very simple. It is, I want all patches to be shown that are equal to or less than 90 days. So today through 90 days old. And this is a carry forward query. So as we move forward, so tomorrow, it will be tomorrow's through 90 days old. So this will move forward with you. And these can be changed, right? You can do a 30-day, a 60, and 90. You do 180 days. These are great ways to stack them inside of a workflow. So you start with a 30-day, maybe clean up to a 31 through 90, stack those in a workflow so they start fresh. Those will eliminate some of your superseded patches now where that they may have fallen into that 31 through 90. They're no longer going to be needed because the superseded patch took care of them. There will be some, however, in that 31 through 90 that did not get superseded. The device is still going to need. So that's where these come into play to stack on until your devices are fully patched, right? Once they're up to current, you no longer need a 90-day window. You could do 30 or 45 to be safe. It's going to move like this. It's going to go real quick anyway. So building these queries helps you set a timeline, a base to say, this is how I want my automation to work. Using that automated piece for the timelines of the patching, then you're going to go into a maintenance window. Maintenance windows are some of my favorite pieces because you can get granular on maintenance windows. Let's say, for example, I mean, we're talking about schools, right? I mean, do you want to patch the devices outside of the standard school hours? I know a lot of K-12, some of them, students take the devices home, the Chromebooks and stuff. Uh, Maybe you want to patch those during school, where if something were to happen, maybe you set a time that says, here, maybe during the morning hours, we're going to patch this K through 4, and then on Monday we'll do those, and then so on and so on throughout the week. You can do that here. That's exactly what maintenance windows are for. Maybe you want to have that control over them, have them in the school while the patching is happening in case of any issue. And then they're there so that you can have somebody on site to help them out. Or you do it after hours. These are also really, really good for, especially when working with servers. So when you get to the server patching needs, these are really going to be helpful because you don't want to obviously take down servers during operational hours. After operational hours, maintenance windows, this is where they're going to come in handy. You tell it, these are our operational hours. I want to go outside of those. So I'm only going to allow the patching to happen from here to here, and only right here can it reboot. But only this server out of these three can reboot only if these two are on. And then if this one comes back on, then only this one can reboot, and so on. You can tell the system to do that by using the maintenance window and triggers in RFA. So it's very helpful to set that automation. These are things where you can do it, and then you're just going to watch and make sure that the things are patching, watch your reports, make sure things are happening the way you want them to, and follow along with them. You're going to make tweaks. It's not hands off. It's automation where you're playing a little cleanup, but more so it's visual and you're hands on, but not aggressively hands on. You're not constantly in there pushing patches, dealing with the overhead, dealing with the constant. This is taking away a good 60-75% of that legwork for you. So with the maintenance windows where you can tell the system, I want you to do this on this date at this hour to this hour. And I only want you to do these devices. It's a great piece. We already told it we want it to do this specific level of patching. I don't want to do anything else. Or maybe I only want it to do patch Tuesday patches for this month on this week, and then that following week we'll do anything else outside of this month's patch Tuesdays. Okay, great. We can do that too. Workflows are where the automation piece happens. It brings that all together. So how we do that is we bring in, we build the workflows. So from a workflow, and what we do is we put together segments of operational function. So I put together a real quick, just basic baseline patch deployment workflow, and to show you what this can do. So let's say that, you want to just, you have your maintenance window. It says on the immediate Thursday following patch Tuesday, I want from this baseline one, we're going to say that baseline is patch Tuesday patches for the current month. All right, and that's the Thursday following patch Tuesday. And I want that to go out to everybody in grades 8 through 12. And we're going to start with them on the Thursday after patch Tuesday. They get patch Tuesday patches first. Then it's going to immediately check and see, does the device need to reboot based on everything it was just sent? Yes, it does. If it does, it's going to go through a reboot. Actually, let me actually show you what that looks like too. So the is reboot needed. This is what it's checking for. So we actually look and see the mandatory needs for when a patch happens are what you can see here under the reboot requirements here. We used to include what you see the unchecked box there is the pending file rename operations. That's less important when it comes to patching. It's important as time goes on, as the daily use of a device goes on and on and on. You're saving documents, you're changing documents, maybe you're moving files, and you're uploading or updating software or applications. That does become important. I'm not negating the importance of it. I'm just saying for when you're applying patches, that could become a false positive, if you will, for is reboot needed. So we want to make sure that we're only focusing on having the device tell us, yes, I need to reboot because one of those four, that says that yes, I have a patch that's been applied to the system, but I can't finish applying it until the device goes through this reboot process. So then that says, okay, yes, I now recognize that. I'm going to move to a reboot. I have here, this is just a reboot now. That's literally just going to say, I need to reboot. Done. I'm rebooting. It goes through a restart right then. There's other options, of course. You can then throw in a reboot with custom UI. The custom UI will be, we've just applied several updates to your system. Your device needs to reboot for these updates to finish applying. Please reboot now, or kind of like what Kat was showing you with the other ones, or you can click snooze to delay this for 2 attempts to snooze for 30 minutes each time. Or you give them 1 chance to snooze for 30 minutes, whatever the case may be. You have those options in here as well. So you give them that little bit of control in the event they're actually doing something, right? They could be using it, maybe taking a test. You don't want to interrupt that. But then it goes on to moving into additional patches. You don't want to just throw those Patch Tuesday patches at it. And you may want to, right? You may want to just say, okay, here on this Thursday after Patch Tuesday, that's all I want to do. And then next week though, make sure then you're going to throw out the rest of the patches that could be needed. Let's check and make sure, do I have anything else that needs to be patched on this device, anything at all? But that's exactly what this can do, and the automation of that to get you to that device readiness state, which says, I have no patches that I need. I am 0 patch needed, which is, that takes that that attack surface from that landscape, and it just shrinks that down, right? And that's exactly what the goal is, to reduce that threat landscape. And by having a 0 patch device, that is exactly what you want to be device readiness. And this automation can help with that. I know I'm getting close to time. I want to give Kat a few minutes for some Q&A real quick before I hand it back over to Kat. I do want to let you know that in addition to the automation piece for patching, we do have automation availability for security vulnerabilities as well. Security vulnerabilities being that more in-depth issue, right? Patches are patches. That's exactly what they say. Either it's an update or an enhancement to an application or platform, or it's a little issue that the developer fixed with a patch, a Band-Aid, right? Security vulnerabilities, they're bigger. It's like stitches instead of a Band-Aid, or surgery instead of a Band-Aid. That's what we have here. You can scan for those. We can deploy fixes for those in here, automated as well. Much more in depth, but happy to go into those as well on a follow-up session if that is a choice. But for now, I've turned back over to Kat and for any Q&A.
Thank you, Christopher. All right. Do you guys have any questions? I know we ran through everything kind of super quickly today. Sorry about the technical issues at the beginning of the call. Do you guys have any questions? You can come off mute and say them, or put them in the chat. Okay, well, I do want to thank you for coming out today. Oh, sorry, I got one in the chat. Of course. Oh, thank you very much. All right, excellent. Well, we appreciate you all coming today. We will be sending over the associated help entries and the recording. And don't forget, we do have regular office hours. We meaning me and the mouse in my pocket. But Tuesdays through Thursdays, I have those regular office hours where you can hop on and hop off to ask your questions. You can also sign up. So if you wanted a deeper session about the vulnerability and patch management or how to set up those resilient applications or device compliance, we can do a deeper dive in your individual environment on that. And of course, check out the K-12 community where you can have conversations with your peers on challenges you're facing and how best to address them. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.